I'm on a year-long journey of improving my prose, and part of that journey includes reading all of the great writing books that teach you how to write. Not so much characters or story or structure, but the art of putting words together. The core skill required to tell your story. And the reason that I'm doing this is that improving your prose is the hardest thing to learn about writing. Now, partly because some books are bad at approaching this topic, and partly because your prose is the way that you naturally understand language. It's how you put words together that make sense to you. Changing your prose is also changing your relationship with language, and that's hard. At the end of this year-long journey, I'm putting together the definitive modern resource for prose, and I want you to be there with me. So like this video and subscribe if you want to be a better, stronger writer. Normally, I film this outside with something cool behind me, but it's just a bad day for that. So how this works is, if you haven't seen any one of my writing book breakdowns before, is that I'm gonna go through this book with a fine-tooth comb and pick out all of the actionable, beneficial advice that applies to me so that we can discuss it and learn from it. I'm approaching this book as someone who primarily writes fiction, so if you're passionate about memoirs or nonfiction, then you may get even more advice out of this book than what I pull out. Pick up your own copy with the link below and support the channel at no extra cost to you. On Writing Well by William Zinsser is maybe the second most praised book on writing that I know of. First being The Elements of Style by Strunk and White, which I've been pretty vocal with about my concerns. It's a reference guide for grammar for sure, but it's not something that changes your approach to writing. It's there for you to look back on when you have a question. This book though, On Writing Well, I kind of go into worried that I'm going to experience something close to the same thing. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I don't think any book on writing advice necessitates 300 plus pages. I think that when you pick up a writing book that's that big, it's usually full of a lot of filler. And this book clocks in at around 350 pages, at least in the paperback version. So who was William Zinsser? He was an esteemed writing teacher who taught at Yale and other various Ivy League universities, and most of his works are about teaching you to write, or they're about nonfiction deep dives into specific areas that interest him. Spring training baseball or jazz, for example. This will be my first time reading one of his books. Zinsser starts his book with an homage to Strunk and White, even saying that he had a photograph of E.B. White hanging on the wall of his office. E.B. White was Zinsser's model for a writer, which I can relate to. I think we all have authors that inspire us to achieve that level of greatness, whether it's Tolkien or Steinbeck or Stephen King, you know? And then after the introduction, something great happens. I suddenly realized that Zinsser's book is full of short chapters. And this is fantastic news. I'll tell you exactly why. Zinsser has organized his book so that the first 30 pages are all about the principles of writing, and the second 40 pages are all about methods of writing, and then we have this sort of classic, almost like genre breakdown that we get with so many writing books, which I don't love. And then Zinsser finishes his book with like a final 80 pages on attitude. And this is a good sign to me. It means that most of the good stuff, the things I'm interested in, are going to be packaged together instead of just like thinly spread out across the book. So let's get into the first chapter, Unity, okay? Now Zinsser starts with a bold statement, but one that I agree with. Writing is the question of solving a problem. Though to me, the largest problem to solve is how to take the image and innate understanding that you have of your story in your head and put it on the page in such a way that the reader gets as excited as you do. The biggest struggle is achieving that potential that you have in your head. Now, Zinsser's description of unity is one of choices. And as a writer, I guess that makes sense, you have to choose the unity of pronoun and the unity of tense. How do you want to present your story? The unity of mood, which here seems to be tone and the voice of how you write. The approach to these topics as one of unity isn't something I've heard before, but Zinsser seems pretty open to these ideas. He doesn't say one choice is better than the other, but instead you should make your own decisions after some thoughts. Settle on the tone and the voice and the tense and the pronoun. Be conscious of the decision and stick with it. Now, I've encountered this in my own writing. Of course, there's no clear choice in tone or POV or tense that is objectively correct in writing, but there are advantages and disadvantages to each. I once got about 10,000 words into the proto draft for a story before I realized that the third person perspective that I had chosen, which is normally the natural way that I would write, maybe wasn't the best choice for this story. The story had a lot of moments of the main character uncovering a new world. It was urban fantasy, there were monsters and secret organizations, all that good stuff. But I decided to shift the story to the first person so that the reader could better be in the character's head as the character processed and experienced all of these mind-bending things. This is just one example of how these choices are all different tools for you to tell the story you need to tell. Next, we get into Zinsser's specialty, which is nonfiction writing, almost journalistic writing. But so much of this can still be applied to creative writing. Let's talk intros. Interesting. Zinsser approaches this in the chapter The Lead and the Ending, and it's the idea that you have to capture the reader's attention immediately. And this is kind of an old school mindset, the idea that if the first sentence of your writing isn't groundbreaking and interesting and thought-provoking, that the reader won't continue to read it. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still a best practice, but I don't think creative writing lives and dies by the first sentence. But that being said, if you can create an intro to your story that immediately invests the reader, then you will be a successful writer. Zinsser talks about capturing the reader. The lead should tell the reader why the story was written and why they should keep reading it. And this is where Zinsser's focus on the more journalistic writing may either capture you, the reader of this book, or leave you waiting for more creative writing focused advice. We spend a page or two talking about hot dogs. That's not important, but I just wanted to make sure that I told you that. It really does happen. And then we return to the importance of the lead before we shift to the importance of the ending. Zinsser says that the perfect ending should take your readers slightly by surprise and yet seem exactly right. And I love that description. That does still apply to creative writing. I love it. It's so good. Now, while Zinsser spends most of this chapter looking at the lead and the ending from the viewpoint of journalism, we have the same idea of importance in creative writing. The intro is the first experience that the reader gets of your world and your characters, but then also it's their first experience with you, the author. And the ending of your story is the last impression that they'll have. The ending plays such a big role in how your story is remembered. It's all so important. The next chapter is called Bits and Pieces, and it's a collection of just small writing advice. Okay, here's the YouTube Shorts version. Learning to write action verbs instead of passive verbs is the life and death of the writer. Verbs are the most used tool of a writer, and precision, aka choosing the correct verb, is the best way to avoid passive voice. Most adverbs are unnecessary and tend to be redundant because the correct verb will render that adverb redundant. Expanding your vocabulary and choosing the right verb will replace most adverbs. Similarly, Zinsser sets his sights on adjectives. He believes that so many adjectives are used in language in a redundant effort to create detail. He says to break the habit of using adjectives that end up feeling more like filler words. Daffodils are already yellow. Don't call them yellow daffodils. Cliffs are already steep. Don't tell us it's a steep cliff. Instead, use adjectives when they provide context that the noun doesn't already communicate. There are a ton of tidbits here, right? From punctuations to certain words being overused. Here's another one I like. This is the first writing book that I've read that tells us the benefit of beginning a sentence with the word but. And it's a good reason. It primes the reader that a significant change is coming in this sentence. Surprisingly, we also get a section here on writing not being a contest. A fantastic concept that's easily understood but hardly ever applied. We all know this, but how many of us still compare our skills as a writer to others around us? Zinsser also says that a difficult sentence that you encounter is usually solved by just getting rid of it. If you get stuck on a sentence trying to pull out that poignant thought or description or idea, then get rid of it. It likely wasn't the right move in the first place, and that's why you got stuck. All right, big topic. One section here is on rewriting. And if you followed my videos on publishing my novella last year, Starlight Farm's Kennel for Talking Dogs, you heard me talk about rewriting the entire draft and how I thought that was a big mistake. That I was overthinking, or maybe I was insecure in how I wrote that initial draft and my writing skills. It's kind of still what I think, but it's comforting to hear Zinsser talk about this topic. We always hear that the first draft is bad, and it's usually true. It's nothing compared to the final product. But writing is about getting that idea down in the proto draft, refining it until eventually it's ready to share with the world. He also emphasizes the importance of reading your work aloud or having it read aloud. If you aren't doing this in some capacity, then you need to start. There is a reason this writing advice is so universal. And then we get to what I consider to be the bane of so many writing books. I don't know if this becomes a requirement from a publisher or what, but we now have over 100 pages of different forms of writing and specific notes on each of them. Now, Zinsser does this in a more acceptable way, choosing to write specifically on different forms of nonfiction writing. Here's things to keep in mind about interviews, and here's how to write a sports article, and here's what to keep in mind when writing about travel. But in so many other writing books, especially the ones focused on creative writing, this is where we get notes on writing mysteries and thrillers and horror and fantasy and romance and every single genre under the sun. And so much of it is useless to the average reader because we write in only a couple genres, and that's kind of it. At least I do. Maybe you're different, but that's how I see these sections. And then we're on to an interesting part of the book called Attitudes. This is the closing section of the book. It covers about 60 pages, starting with the sound of your voice. Zinsser talks about your voice as an author, and voice is where each writer gets to develop their own unique style of writing, putting together words in a way that represents them. Hemingway writes different than Brandon Sanderson, who writes differently than Kurt Vonnegut. And just like one author has a unique voice, readers also have unique preferences. And what kind of writing voice that's in vogue at the moment can change in time. Interestingly, Zinsser uses this time to also bring up cliches in writing as well. They don't give a ton of examples, but they sort of equate a cliche to a shorthand form of metaphor and that it should be removed in editing. What authors do you try to mimic? Because Zinsser talks here about developing your voice by trying to mimic the authors that you love and admire. And I love this. I say this all the time. I can't state how much I love this idea. You should be trying to steal from your favorite authors. Your voice should be an amalgamation of every author that inspires you combined with you. It's so simple. Reading intentionally and studying others is an invaluable skill, not just in art, but in life. You should always be learning. The book ends with a few chapters that explore the mindset of being a writer. How do you decide what to write? When do you become a writer? How do you finally decide that a story is done? I encourage you to pick up the book and read through this whole thing, including those chapters. I'm more focused on the craft of writing at the moment, but understanding the mindset of the writer is just as important as understanding the craft. This book is amazing. I see, of course, why it's so highly praised. And for the first time, I see a highly praised book that I agree with, right? In my mind, I find it to be as comforting a read as On Writing by Stephen King, with so much more value in terms of actually teaching you about writing. Some pieces of advice are straightforward and clear. That's all you could ask for. Others are more abstract, but still actionable, and that is great. I'm officially a Zenser fanboy from now on, and I hope you liked this video. You can check out this playlist of my other writing book breakdowns if you like this. Just go through those videos and just absorb this knowledge. It will help you be a better writer, and that's what this channel is about. Subscribe if you want more content like this, like the video so I know that people care, and come hang out in our Discord with 500 other writers like you who just want to be better. There's a link in the description below. And as always, thank you for watching.